Princess Alara stood on the balcony of her palace, gazing out over the shimmering cityscape of Xiria, her home planet, once a thriving and powerful civilization now teetering on the brink of extinction. The Xirians, known for their advanced technology and long lifespan, were now facing a crippling infertility crisis. For generations, their genetic pool had shrunk, and the genetic flaw had spread. They were dying, and there was no cure. Desperate measures had been taken: gene manipulation, ritual sacrifices, even praying to the ancient gods, but nothing worked. One day, in a rare moment of reflection, Alara had an epiphany. Humans. It was widely known that humans possessed a remarkable genetic diversity, and it was whispered among the Xirian elite that their genes might hold the key to the future of the Xirian race. So, Alara made a decree, one that would echo throughout the galaxy. A human male must be brought to Xiria to mate with her daughters. It was the only way to restore fertility, or so she hoped. The Xirian emissaries on Earth were instructed to find the most suitable human specimen, and after much deliberation, Gabriel was chosen. Gabriel wasn't a soldier, a diplomat, or a genius, but he was average in every sense, a man who had lived through enough political negotiations and high-stakes scenarios to know how to turn every situation into his favor. Little did he know, however, that he was about to become a pawn in a galactic game that even the stars couldn't predict. When Gabriel arrived, he was greeted with the typical Xirian fanfare, the grand welcome meant for the savior of their people. The moment he stepped off the shuttle, he was ushered into a luxurious palace filled with the finest Xirian delicacies and a host of strange alien beings, all watching him expectantly. It was the beginning of his new life, or so they thought. Gabriel had been informed, rather bluntly, of his purpose. "Your genes are vital to the survival of our species," Princess Alara told him with regal formality. "You will mate with my daughters to restore fertility to our people." Gabriel, who had only been expecting a diplomatic mission, blinked in disbelief. He tried to maintain composure, though his initial reaction was anything but dignified. "Wait, so you're telling me I'm here for what now?" "To do what exactly?" he asked, as if he had misheard. "You will be mated to my daughters," Alara repeated, her voice unwavering. "You are the last hope for our species."
Right.
"So I'm basically a sperm donor?" Gabriel's face contorted as he tried to make sense of the situation. Alara smiled faintly, clearly confused by his casual response. "You misunderstand, human. It is more than that. You will be chosen by my daughters to ensure the future of our bloodline." Gabriel, ever the diplomat, was quick on his feet. "Well, that's fantastic. But I'm not really the mate-for-life type. You might have to look for another guy for that." He paused, glancing around at the over-the-top decorations. "This place looks pretty expensive. Are you sure you can't just, buy a couple of humans from somewhere and let them do all the heavy liftings?" Alara didn't know how to respond. The Xirians had never been this bluntly challenged before. Gabriel's impudence caught her off guard. Still, she tried to maintain control. "You misunderstand the gravity of our situation, human. Your genes are more important than you realize." Gabriel shrugged nonchalantly.
"Yeah, sure.
"But I've got some pretty big questions before I sign anything. Like, what's the compensation? Do you offer free food with that, or?" Alara's expression faltered. She was the princess, and as far as she was concerned, humans didn't bargain with royalty, let alone joke around during a crisis. Yet, here was Gabriel, completely indifferent to her authority, undermining her every word with a sarcastic grin and a series of unreasonable demands. "Perhaps we should begin with your accommodations," Alara said, regaining composure. "We have prepared a suite for you that rivals the finest on Xiria. There, you will be introduced to my daughters." "Introduced? What exactly does that mean?" Gabriel asked, raising an eyebrow. Alara looked at him as if she were speaking to a child. "You will become acquainted with them. Yes, and they will test your compatibility." Gabriel couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity. "Test my compatibility? Is this like a reality show where I have to pick which princess I want to mate with? Or do I just have to pass some physical exam?" The princess was silent for a moment, staring at him in disbelief. You mock the future of our species, she said, her voice betraying her frustration. But you will soon understand the importance of your role. Gabriel was still processing all of this when he was led to a grand hall, where he was introduced to the princess's daughters. The three royal sisters, each more beautiful and intimidating than the last, studied him as if he were an exotic specimen. Gabriel, this is Princess Liara, Princess Kelly, and Princess Talus, Alara said with an air of pride. They are the future of our species. And you are the key to saving them. Gabriel's face remained unreadable. He had never been in a situation like this, where the stakes were so high and the demands so bizarre. Liara, the eldest daughter, stepped forward first, eyeing him with a certain curiosity. So, human, she said, her voice silky and alluring, how do you feel about saving a dying race? Gabriel gave her a lopsided grin. I feel fantastic. But I think we need to discuss logistics first. How does this whole mating thing work? Do you need a special license, or should I just go with the flow? Princess Liara blinked, clearly taken aback by his irreverence. Kelly, the second princess, scoffed. You make light of our plight. Do you think you can simply wander in here and make demands? Gabriel raised an eyebrow. Well, you've got to admit, this whole thing is a bit bizarre, right? Talus, the youngest princess, eyed Gabriel with a mix of curiosity and challenge. If you refuse, then you will be the cause of our extinction. Is that what you want? Gabriel leaned back in his chair, looking amused. I didn't ask for this gig, but I'll play along. Let's see how far I can stretch your resources first. He gave Alara a wink. I've always wanted to test my negotiation skills with royalty. The royal family, baffled by Gabriel's lack of concern, exchanged glances. None of them had expected a human, let alone an ambassador, to challenge them so openly. But the stakes were high, and they had no choice but to proceed with their plan. Alara, though clearly frustrated, knew that if Gabriel truly was the key to saving her people, she had to keep him interested. And so, the absurd negotiations began, with Gabriel at the helm, questioning every aspect of their plan. As far as he was concerned, he was in the midst of an intergalactic crisis that he would solve, on his own terms. But one thing was certain, he was not here to mate with the princesses. Gabriel had a different agenda in mind entirely. And the Zirians were about to learn that nothing was ever as simple as it seemed when humans were involved. Gabriel stood in the royal chamber, flanked by three Zirian princesses who were clearly not accustomed to being disrespected, let alone laughed at. Princess Alara, despite her best efforts to retain her composure, could barely conceal her frustration. The tension in the room was thick, and Gabriel was only making it worse with every sarcastic remark he uttered. Look, Gabriel began, his tone as nonchalant as ever. I'm not here to start a revolution. I'm just here because you called me, what, a genetic savior? If you want me to mate with your daughters, there's got to be a little give and take, right? Alara's eyes narrowed. Your lack of understanding will not help your situation, Gabriel. You are here to save our species. Yeah, save the species, he muttered. But we're not doing this without terms. How about a tour of the palace? I'm getting the impression you guys are a bit overboard with your royal accommodations. Alara hesitated. She had expected to negotiate with a human. What she hadn't expected was a human who wasn't begging for his life. You will get your tour, she replied, through gritted teeth. But after that, we will begin the process. Gabriel gave a small shrug, clearly unimpressed by her authority.
Fine.
But first, I need to see the amenities. And I want to meet your staff, especially the ones in charge of the food. I'm a bit picky with my meals. As they walked through the royal palace, Gabriel's mind raced with possibilities. If he played this right, he could turn this whole situation into something that worked in his favor. There was no way he was going to be pushed around by some overinflated alien princesses, no matter how dire their situation. So, how does this work? Gabriel asked, his eyes scanning the opulent halls. Am I going to be locked in a room with your daughters, or is there some kind of process? Alara, visibly strained, tried to maintain her royal composure. You'll be introduced to them, and the mating rituals will begin soon after. Right, Gabriel said, looking back over his shoulder. The mating rituals. Back on Earth, we don't call it that. We just talk. Have some dinner. Maybe watch a movie. You guys really have a whole thing, don't you? The princesses walked in silence, clearly puzzled by his approach. Alara had expected a terrified, compliant human, but Gabriel wasn't what she had bargained for. He was clearly not interested, and his nonchalant attitude only fueled her growing frustration. The tour continued with more absurdities. Gabriel demanded Earth-style cuisine, something involving pizza, nachos, and more comfort foods. The Xerians, used to a diet of biologically tailored meals, were confused. The preparation was baffling, but Gabriel insisted. He wasn't going to be a pawn in their game, at least not without making his position clear. Don't get me wrong, he said as they sat down to a chaotic spread of Earth foods. I'm not saying you guys don't have class. But I need to feel at home, And right now, I feel like I'm about to be stuffed into some ancient mating chamber. He stabbed a piece of pizza with a fork, ignoring the perplexed looks from his alien hosts. You got any dip? Alara clenched her fists. This was not how the proceedings were supposed to unfold. She had expected Gabriel to be overwhelmed by their customs, to be desperate to comply for the sake of his survival. But instead, he was playing games, mocking everything she and her court held sacred. Worse, he was enjoying himself, pushing the limits of what was acceptable and making absurd demands along the way. So, about this mating process, Gabriel continued, taking another bite of pizza. What are we really doing here? Is it some kind of ancient ritual where you, I don't know, put on ceremonial robes and chant or something? Alara's patience snapped. Enough of this nonsense, Gabriel. You will come with me now. We will begin the preparations. Sure, Gabriel said, finishing his slice with a dramatic flourish. But let me get this straight. You want me to just mate with your daughters for the future of your species, right? And you think I'll just say yes because you're royalty? Alara stiffened. You are in no position to question our authorities. Oh, I beg to differ, Gabriel said with a smirk.
You need me.
You need my genes. And as it turns out, I'm a great negotiator. So, here's the deal. I'll cooperate. But I want some perks. What kind of perks? Alara asked, barely able to hide her annoyance. Gabriel leaned in, as though sharing a secret. First off, I want a personal suite. A big one. None of this one-room business. And I want an Earth-compatible entertainment system. Movies, games, the whole shebang. I'm not here to just sit in a room and stare at the ceiling. Alara's jaw clenched. This human, this Gabriel, was not what she had expected. He wasn't scared of her. He wasn't intimidated by her power, her status. He wasn't even interested in saving her people, as she had hoped. Gabriel was a man playing a game, and he was good at it. Anything else? Alara asked, her voice dripping with disdain. Gabriel looked at her, eyes glinting with a mixture of amusement and calculation. You know what? I want the royal chefs to learn how to make a proper burger. If we're doing this whole species-saving thing, I want something that feels like home. Alara's frustration reached a boiling point, but she had no choice but to agree. Her people were desperate. And if Gabriel was the key to saving them, then she would have to swallow her pride and entertain his ridiculous demands. It was a bitter pill, but it was the only one left to her. We'll arrange for that, Alara said through gritted teeth. But you will do your part, Gabriel. You will. Gabriel raised his hand. Yeah, I'll do my part. But don't expect me to just fall in line. I'm not your pawn. If you want me to help, you're going to have to give me more than a few royal perks. Alara stared at him, seething with frustration. This was not how it was supposed to go. The Xerians had never been made to negotiate like this, especially not by a human. Gabriel had turned the tables on her, and there was nothing she could do but play along. As Gabriel continued to push for more luxuries, his negotiations began to stretch the limits of her patience. Each time she granted a request, he would add another, testing her resolve. But she had no choice. If they were to survive, they needed his cooperation. And so, Gabriel continued to outwit her, turning every moment into an opportunity for himself. Alara, now caught in his web of absurd demands and negotiations, realized that the fate of her species rested not on her control, but on Gabriel's whims. The situation on Ziria had escalated beyond anything Gabriel could have predicted. What had begun as a simple negotiation for his comfort had transformed into a full-blown battle of wits between him and Princess Alara. Despite the Zirian's desperate need for his genetic material, he continued to twist the rules, manipulate every situation, and demand more than what he could ever have imagined. It wasn't long before the royal court became aware of the absurdity of Gabriel's requests. They were not used to bargaining, especially with humans, and certainly not in the way Gabriel was conducting himself. As Alara tried to maintain control over the situation, the court's political factions began to question her decisions, seeing her patience as weakness. One afternoon, Gabriel sat in the grand hall of the palace, sipping on an earth-imported soda as if he were at a high-end cafe, surrounded by alien dignitaries and a visibly uncomfortable Alara. The princess, now weary of his antics, tried once more to regain some semblance of authority. "Gabriel," she said, her voice stiff with frustration, "you will participate in the trials tomorrow. You will show that you are capable of saving our species." "Oh, absolutely," Gabriel said, leaning back in his chair with a grin. "But just so we're clear, the trial part of this sounds like it needs a little tweaking. You can't just throw me into some intergalactic obstacle course without a few ground rules. How about we negotiate the terms before we get to that point?" The room fell silent. The Zirians weren't used to negotiating with a human, let alone having one dictate the terms of a life-and-death trial. They were used to their customs, to the traditions that had been in place for centuries. Gabriel, however, was rewriting the rulebook as he went. Alara, her patience running thin, signaled for the trials to begin the next day. "You will face the challenges set by our court," she said, her tone now colder. "But know this, Gabriel, if you fail, your people will suffer the consequences." Yeah, I get it," Gabriel replied, still sipping his soda. "But I need a few things before I'm ready for your trials. I need to know exactly what I'm up against, and I'm not diving headfirst into something that doesn't benefit me in some way." Alara glared at him. "You will comply. If you don't, we have no more use for you." Gabriel leaned forward, finally setting his drink down with a serious look. "I'll comply, all right. But here's the deal. I'm not going to risk my life for something that doesn't make sense. If you want me to help, you'll make it worth my while. I'll participate in your trials, but I want to guarantee that after I win, because, let's face it, I want to leave here with something substantial." Alara's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, she was unsure of herself. Gabriel had turned the tables on her. She hadn't anticipated a human with this much audacity, but she had no choice. Desperation had driven her to this point, and it was now clear that Gabriel held all the cards.
"Fine," she spat.
"We will provide you with whatever you need, within reason. But you will do your part. There is no turning back." The next day, Gabriel was led to the Zirian Arena, an extravagant, high-tech space where the trials would take place. Alara watched from her royal perch, flanked by her daughters, all of whom were watching with varying levels of curiosity and disdain. As the trials began, Gabriel was introduced to the first challenge, an intergalactic game of bowling. It was an event in which alien competitors had to launch enormous metallic balls across a massive arena to knock over towering pins made of pure energy. The challenge was meant to test strength and precision, but to Gabriel, it seemed more like an alien form of bowling gone terribly wrong. "Oh, this will be fun," Gabriel said with a smirk, picking up one of the massive bowling balls with ease. "I've been practicing this for years." The Zirians, who had designed the challenge to intimidate him, watched in disbelief as Gabriel effortlessly rolled the ball, sending it smashing into the pins with the force of a small asteroid. The arena erupted in a mixture of awe and confusion. Alara, though she had tried to keep her cool, felt a knot tighten in her stomach. Gabriel wasn't just succeeding, he was making a mockery of their sacred trials. Alara began, but Gabriel raised his hand to stop her. "Don't worry, I'm just warming up." "You wouldn't want me to blow you away too soon, would you?" he said, flashing her a grin. Next came the cooking challenge. Gabriel had insisted that this trial be based on Earth food, as it was the only way he would participate. The Xerians had provided him with ingredients they thought were suitable, though their understanding of human cuisine was severely lacking. The ingredients were bizarre: alien fruits that glowed and changed colors when touched, and strange vegetables that made no sense to Gabriel at all. Still, he accepted the challenge with gusto. "I'm telling you," Gabriel said to the confused onlookers, "a good burger can solve most problems." He began concocting a bizarre fusion dish, mixing the earth ingredients with alien produce in ways that no one had ever seen. As the aroma filled the air, the Xerians began to gather around, their senses overwhelmed by the strange smells. When Gabriel finally presented his dish, Alara cautiously took a bite. To her surprise, it wasn't entirely terrible. In fact, it was strangely comforting, with flavors she had never encountered before. But as she finished her bite, she realized something disturbing. Gabriel had just outsmarted them again. He had manipulated their food challenge, turning it into an opportunity to gain their approval and ultimately control. Gabriel leaned back, wiping his hands on a napkin. "Well, I'd say that's a success, don't you think? Now, how about we talk about my next perk? I'm thinking a nice little vacation spot. Maybe a beach?" Alara's hands clenched into fists, and the royal court began to murmur. This Gabriel, was proving to be far more than just a genetic donor. He had become a force unto himself, turning every trial into an opportunity to bargain for more. As each challenge passed, it became more clear that he wasn't here to help. He was here to take control. Alara watched helplessly as Gabriel outsmarted her, turning every tradition and expectation upside down. Her frustration reached a boiling point, but the reality was that Gabriel was too clever for her. He had navigated each test with ease, making mockery of the very trials meant to prove his worth. He wasn't just winning, they were losing. But there was one final trial, and Gabriel knew it was coming. It was the ultimate test, the trial of the ancients, a test of strength and endurance that no one had ever dared to complete. If Gabriel succeeded, there would be no question left. He would be the one to dictate the future of Xeria, and Alara would be powerless to stop him. As he prepared for the final challenge, he couldn't help but smirk. This was what he'd been waiting for. The ultimate game of survival had begun, and for the Xerians, they were about to find out that sometimes the biggest challenge wasn't physical strength, but sheer human cunning. The trial of the ancients loomed ahead, and for the first time, even Gabriel felt a hint of uncertainty. The Xerians had built this trial up as the ultimate test of strength, wit, and endurance. It was said that no alien had ever completed it in its entirety, and few had even survived the first challenge. The stakes were higher now than ever before. Gabriel had pushed the Xerians to their limits, outwitting them at every turn, but this final trial would be different. There would be no more games, no more negotiations. This would be about survival, and he wasn't sure he could outweed his way out of this one. Princess Alara stood by, watching as Gabriel prepared himself for the challenge. Her once pristine composure was now a mask barely holding together. It was clear she had underestimated him from the start, but this was her final chance. If he succeeded in the trial of the ancients, there would be no turning back. He would control their fate, and she would be forced to acknowledge that he had not only survived but bested her entire species. "Are you ready?" Alara asked, her voice sharp with frustration and desperation. She still clung to some semblance of power, though it was slipping away with every passing moment. Gabriel smirked, a gleam of amusement in his eyes. "Ready? I've been ready since the moment you brought me here. Let's see if your so-called ancient trial is any more challenging than your ridiculous bowling contest." The arena stretched out before him, a vast expanse of alien terrain designed to test every conceivable form of human strength and adaptability. The first test would involve traversing a treacherous landscape full of shifting gravity fields, jagged rocks, and unpredictable energy currents. It was designed to test endurance and agility, but Gabriel wasn't concerned about that. After all, he had survived worse on Earth. Urban jungles and hostile corporate environments had prepared him for just about anything. As the trial began, Gabriel stepped into the designated zone. His footing was immediately thrown off by the uneven terrain, but he adjusted quickly, tapping into his knowledge of survival skills to stay balanced. The gravity fluctuations didn't help, but instead of stumbling or falling, Gabriel adopted an almost graceful agility, hopping from one precarious rock to another, laughing under his breath as he did. The Xerians, watching from their royal perch, could hardly believe their eyes. "This is supposed to be a test of strength, not some kind of cosmic hopscotch," Gabriel muttered, leaping onto a floating platform just as it started to disintegrate beneath him. "It's cute, though. Real cute." Princess Alara clenched her fists, her eyes narrowing. "He's not taking this seriously. He's mocking our traditions." But even she couldn't deny that Gabriel was succeeding. He was moving through the trial with ease, his human ingenuity allowing him to navigate the impossible terrain without breaking a sweat. As the trial continued, Gabriel encountered another challenge, an obstacle course that tested his ability to resist the overwhelming effects of a massive electromagnetic storm. The Xerians had designed the storm to cripple even the most advanced species, frying their nervous systems and shutting down their movements. Gabriel, however, was quick to realize that this storm was more about intimidation than actual harm. He took a deep breath, his mind racing. It wasn't the first time he had been thrown into a stressful situation where he needed to think his way out. Gabriel closed his eyes for a moment, focusing on the buzzing energy surrounding him. It wasn't natural, it wasn't random, it was controlled. The storm was a game, an illusion meant to create fear, and fear was the easiest thing to exploit. With a sly grin, Gabriel stepped forward, walking straight into the storm. He didn't flinch as the electromagnetic pulse surged through the air, but instead, he focused on the rhythmic pattern of the pulses. With each strike, Gabriel subtly adjusted his movements, using the storm's energy to his advantage. It wasn't just a test of strength, it was a test of perception, and Gabriel had it figured out in minutes. "This is your grand test," Gabriel called out to the Xerians as he navigated the storm, unaffected by its intensity. "Come on, I've had worse after a bad lunch." The Xerians, now completely stunned, could do nothing but watch as Gabriel made his way across the obstacle course, completely unscathed. Every trial, every test they had devised, was being systematically dismantled by his human resourcefulness. There was no defeating him through brute force alone. Gabriel wasn't playing by their rules. He was rewriting the game. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Gabriel reached the final challenge. The Xerians had prepared a massive gladiatorial arena where he would face off against a beast of unimaginable size and strength, a genetically engineered creature that had been bred for one purpose: to destroy invaders. The beast was a towering, muscular creature with scales as hard as steel, massive claws that could tear through solid rock, and teeth capable of cutting through metal. The Xerians had expected this to be the end of Gabriel, the ultimate test that would prove the worth of their species. Gabriel, however, wasn't concerned in the slightest. He had faced worse odds back on Earth: violent criminals, ruthless politicians, and opportunistic corporations. This alien beast, despite its size and ferocity, was just another obstacle to overcome. With a deep breath, Gabriel raised his arms, a mock salute to the Xerians who were eagerly watching. "All right, big guy, let's see what you've got." The creature roared, charging forward with terrifying speed. The ground trembled beneath its weight, and its massive claws swiped toward Gabriel, who ducked just in time. The arena erupted in cheers as Gabriel deftly avoided the monster's attack, rolling to the side and coming to his feet in one fluid motion. The beast turned to face him again, its eyes glowing with primal rage. But Gabriel wasn't intimidated. He had no intention of fighting this creature with sheer force. Instead, he used the creature's own momentum against it, dodging another swipe and causing the beast to crash into the arena's perimeter wall. As it recoiled, Gabriel moved in, quickly assessing his surroundings for any weaknesses. The Xerians had underestimated him. They had thought that brute force would win the day, but Gabriel had learned long ago that the quickest path to victory often didn't involve direct confrontation. With a sudden motion, Gabriel grabbed one of the massive chains hanging from the walls, using it to swing himself onto the creature's back. The Xerians, once again stunned, watched as Gabriel expertly looped the chain around the creature's neck, causing it to thrash wildly in an attempt to free itself. "You think your beast is a match for me?" Gabriel shouted, holding onto the chain with all his might. "This is just a warm-up, kids." With a final tug, the creature collapsed, defeated not by brute force, but by Gabriel's unrelenting will and ingenuity. The Xyrians stared in stunned silence as Gabriel stood triumphantly over the beast, breathing heavily, but with a smirk on his face. Alara stood, unable to mask her disbelief. Gabriel had done it. He had passed every single trial with ease, and now the Xyrians were at his mercy. There was no denying it any longer. He had won. "You've won, Gabriel," Alara said, her voice quieter than before. "You've proven yourself more than capable. What do you want in return?" Gabriel grinned. "Oh, I think you know what I want. But first, I have a few more terms to discuss."